Writing. Well, it's a pretty nondescript title, but what's in today's lecture is pretty important. So let's look at what we're going to talk about. So here are the guided lecture notes. You're going to see that some of these circle back, terrible cliche there, but circle back to what we talked about earlier in this semester with ethos, logos, and pathos. We'll also talk about common errors, writing styles, paraphrasing, and a couple other things that are really good to consider, not just for business writing, but for any writing you're doing. Now, rather than start with our lecture straight off, let's shake things up a bit. And of course, this, could work better if we were in person, but here it is on the video, and that's a quick pop quiz. Can you match each of the following to the best mode of communication? Pause the video for 1 minute and start matching. Okay, time's up. Did you find one answer for each scenario? If not, you're not alone. For some of these scenarios, several of the modes could work. There's no right or wrong answers to this matching exercise, but there are strengths and weaknesses associated with each mode. You have to ask yourself questions when you're communicating. Does the information need to be received as soon as possible? Will it require extra time and prep? What about the visual representation of data, the relationships there? Some models of communication are more appropriate than others for a given scenario. For example, you could use a fax to tell employees about a meeting, but really, would you? It'd probably not be very effective because who owns a fax machine anymore? You could respond to an international customer's request for a price quote with a face-to-face meeting, but would that be a good use of time and money? That might be a fun trip though. So let's talk about common errors in English. How well do you know the difference between these commonly used words? Let's find out. Take a minute to answer these yourself. Pause the video and then unpause when you're done. Well, I'm not going to go over all of these. The common errors are easy to look up online and see what the differences are. I'm going to focus on a few errors I see students make most often in their writing. Let's start with number 2, effect and affect. The key to remember the difference is how to know which one's a noun and which one's a verb, and it's actually more complicated than that, but on the basic level, affect with an A is a verb that means to impact. You can remember this because affect starts with an A and verbs are often active. The noun version starts with an E, and there are exceptions. Affect with an A can be a noun that means emotion and mood, and effect with an E can be a verb that means to bring about something. So I'm just sighing sadly to myself, but in other words, most commonly you'll see words where affect is a verb and effect is a noun. Let's do number 5, lay or lie. I used to have trouble with this one too until someone would get me a great way to remember it. So only humans lie, as in L-I-E. So if it isn't a human doing the action, use lay. Usually, not always. So here's the problem with American grammar. There are all these exceptions to it. So what you want to figure out are what are the key errors that other people are going to recognize. 2, 2, and 2 on number 12 is a big one. So is number 11. If you're making errors on that, it can really give a negative impression. Here's another pop quiz, pop quiz round, common errors. So you can pause the video if you want here and then unpause when you're done. And there's our answers. All right, go ahead and hit pause on this. See if you can pick the right words. And here is another round of what the information would be. Final set. So see if you can fill that out. And there are the answers. So all of that together, why does that matter? It matters because, like it or not, people will make judgments about your education level and intelligence when they see errors with these words. At the very least, having these errors will send the message that you didn't care enough about whatever you were writing to proofread it. What kind of impression do you make on a potential client if you have an email just riddled with grammatical and spelling errors? If you can't check your work in that context, what message are you sending them about your ability to solve some complex business problem or be detail-oriented in checking a spreadsheet? Small things matter, editings matter. So let's now talk about how we started with how not to make a bad first impression. Here's something else to consider. Everything you write, at least for business writing, should have the equivalent of a thesis, some main point or purpose that you're trying to convey. Yes, thesis statements matter beyond high school and college. If you can't tell a client or a boss the value of what you're doing on a project or what the goal is in a specific sentence, you have a big problem. You don't want to make your audience work to figure out what you're talking about. You use a thesis to make your purpose clear. That orients the reader so they know the so what of a document and remember your message. For instance, I might be writing a business proposal for a client, and my thesis is, by restructuring the point of your point of sale devices, we can save you over $100,000 in the next year. Well, the statement was clear. I didn't say it very clearly, but it was clear, easy to follow, specific, and as a client, I like saving money. I like that. It sounds like you know what you're talking about. The rest of the sentences matter too. So even though the thesis statement may be the most important sentence in your document, it doesn't mean you're off the hook with the rest of the sentences. Which of the following sentences are good examples of correct and clear business English? Take a moment to pause the video and look at all of these. For sentences needing improvement, think about what would be wrong, and if you wanted to go all in on this, you could even write a sentence that corrects the problem. Let's see how many of these you picked up on. The solutions I suggest here are just one or two ways to fix the sentences that need improvement. You might have come up with another solution that could be right. This first sentence is fine as is. We could make it shorter by saying Marlis is being promoted next month. This one, however, is not. Is not a sentence. It's a fragment, a dependent clause, and so it needs some help. Here's another possibility. Combine this dependent clause with the first sentence. Suddenly it makes sense, right? This sentence, while grammatically correct, is way too formal. It verges on bureaucratic language. It needs a rewrite to bring it down into the realm of something that people would actually write. Like this. This next one suffers from the same affliction and needs a similar reworking. Just as before, take a moment to pause this video, this is round 2 of this, and think about what you see in each of these. Are any in need of improvement? What would you fix? First sentence is fine, as is. This one's not. Again, a fragment, lack of verb. So we can give this a verb. And here's another possibility where we look at this one. This is missing a word, and better version there, or even a little bit better down there at the bottom. Here, this one again needs work. Please attend a meeting for all employees who will be promoted, versus better, please attend the meeting. Needs some work there. Still needs a little bit of work, but you can see it's getting stronger. So let's then talk about writing as self-expression. Imagine you get an interview at Deloitte. How do you dress? Like this? Probably not. Not the best idea. So how do you know what's wrong? This is something where it has been sort of encultured in you. Writing styles are similar. There's some that are right for working in a conservative Big Four accounting firm, and there's others that are not. Even Iris Apfel, who's in this picture, would agree. So what slide would you, or what style that is, would you use in business writing? So business writing is typically not an avenue for self-expression. Our goals are to save time and keep the focus on the audience, content, and purpose. So let's look at some writing styles. This is bureaucratic. It may look impressive if you're easily swayed by big words, but it is a waste of time and thus money to use bureaucratic language in business most of the time. Do you want to read the sentence? Probably not. Nobody else will either. There's been research where they've looked at the bureaucratic or the federal language that gets used like this and found that people tend to comply less with even government orders when it's written in this language versus when they're writing it more casually. This is short, but this is an example of formal style, so it might be what you send in a client an email. It's detailed and polite, but you don't always need to be this formal. This is a little awkward if it's, I don't know, somebody you're chatting with on Microsoft Teams and talk to every day. This is informal. It's the same information in a more conversational tone. It sounds like how you talk. It's casual, how you talk to a coworker. Again, that message on Teams. You have to be careful though, because this could seem a little less professional. You need to consider how well you know the receiver and what your relationship is like. So what about jargon? In this example, I don't even think Mr. Jenkins knows what he is saying, let alone his audience. This is a word vomit of jargon. In general, you want to avoid jargon because it makes your writing more difficult to understand. Some, however, writers will use that jargon because it makes their writing more difficult to understand. It can hide their purpose. However, we want to be ethical communicators, so we want to try to generally avoid jargon. And we actually talked a little bit about that earlier this semester with language. Now think about passive voice. Now, if you had an English teacher like mine, they were always, and this has gone on into college for me, they were always talking about how you should avoid passive voice. And I have also seen examples where either people don't know what it is, and this includes people who are grading, and they just start circling versions of to be, thinking it's passive voice, and that's not the case. Voice has to do with verbs and the way the sentences are functioning. Think about it like the word be, or let's use is not necessarily going to be passive, just like the number 5 is not necessarily going to be anything. When you put it into an equation, though, how that number acts and what it means depends upon the whole function. So here it's the same thing. Think about sentences as operating like a mathematical equation where you're taking different things and plugging them into the right place, and we're looking at how is this progressing. So my trick that you might use, that I don't actually usually use, but this is more Dr. Lickadoo's trick than mine, but that is one way to determine if a sentence is passive or active is to add zombies to the end of it. So if the sentence makes sense with by zombies, then it is passive voice. Bob was killed by zombies, passive. Zombies killed Bob by zombies doesn't make sense, so you might then know it's active. So that's one quick way that you can do it if you want. In active voice, the relationship between the subject and the verb is generally pretty clear and straightforward. The subject is going to perform the action. We use active voice for most business writing. Here in active voice, the zombies perform the action. Sammy broke the copier, or Sammy would have broken the copier, are both examples of active voice. Adding zombies there doesn't make sense. Here, though, you might think about when we do want to use passive voice. It can be tactful, it can de-emphasize the bad news, it can hide who committed the action, which can or cannot be ethical depending on how you do it. So think about the by zombies trick here. The copier was broken by zombies. A copier has been broken by zombies. There you can think about how the structure of the sentence is set up so that it is passive and not active. All right. The copier is broken. There's that exception, is not passive. It's a use of to be. So that's again why the zombies trick I think works pretty well, but there I don't love it. So that is one way though that you can generally try and remember it if you're getting that feedback to avoid passive voice in one of your classes. All right, let's go back now to something we talked about earlier this semester a little bit. And this time we're going to talk about it within the context of Toulmin's 3-part rhetorical strategy. So you are going to start to think about structuring arguments. So we've already talked about organization. We've talked about concepts like ethos and pathos and logos. We've talked about elements that we can use to further our arguments. When we get to chapter 17.1, we'll also talk about deductive and inductive strategies and arguments. So anyways, all of this coming back together, this is Toulmin's 3-part rhetorical strategy. And so you may have seen this before, where you start with a claim. So it's what you believe and want to convince someone else of. So there in the claim is, it's important for women to make their LinkedIn profiles visible to recruiters. How do you back it up? So what's your proof? So it's because most women are more likely to keep their social media profiles private than men. If you want to pause it and look up that article by Tim T. Kane, it's really interesting. And then you come to the warrant. So again, people generally never can read your mind. So the term for warrant here, you'll want to try and understand. So this is the connection between the claim and the supporting reasons. So think here about the visual link between data, grounds, and claim. So when we have that sentence, the Career Center providing training, encouraging everyone, LinkedIn being public, everything's pulled together. All right. All right, next let's talk about paraphrasing. So you've heard about the importance of paraphrasing. It's a way to break down information. You know you need to put things into your own words. I don't think this is going to be new for you. I want to give you, though, a couple of tips here. You can see some of them on the screen with just reading it out loud. Write the concept in your own words. For me, the best thing that you can do here is if you are paraphrasing a paragraph that's in a book, you close the book and then try and write down what you remember. If you're paraphrasing a journal article, you read the whole journal article and then close the journal article. So zero out the copy and paste. Most of us do not have a perfect memory. We're not going to end up paraphrasing. And then when you do paraphrase, you want to make sure, I think I said that backwards, you're not going to end up quoting. Most of us are not that good. You want to make sure that you are putting things into your own words. And then I would encourage you, especially in a more formal paper, that you're going back and looking at the original to make sure that yours lines up correctly. All right, 3 tips here on avoiding plagiarism. Make sure when you're reading articles or you're reading a paragraph in a book that you're reading for the main idea, you're communicating that main idea, and then you're typing your own paraphrased version. So no copy and paste, and you're going to be okay here. Make sure that you are citing it still even when you're paraphrasing. All right, so wrap up here. Organization and style matter. They matter on a big level. They matter on an individual level. They matter when you are doing a text message. They matter when it's a formal document. And then second, that's that good writing is good writing, but the rules are going to vary depending on your audience. So the chapters in this writing section talk about how we have different levels of language, and we need to be careful that we're picking the correct level for the correct audience. All right, so we have talked about a lot today. After doing the reading, watching this video, hopefully you understand more about some of the elements that you should consider when you are writing. Many of them apply no matter what the audience, although some of them are specific to business writing. And now you can immediately start putting those into practice as you work on assignments not for this course, but also in all of your writing. If you do find that you need additional help on your grammar, organization, style, the Business Communication Center is there just for JSOM students to provide that. Let me know if you need help getting connected to them. It's bcc.utdallas.edu. There's also a fantastic course on LinkedIn Learning by Judy Steiner-Williams, who goes through grammar in detail for several hours. There's a bunch of those on LinkedIn Learning. If you find that you're getting feedback that your writing is a little sloppy or confusing, that's a really good place to go to get some additional information, since I am not going to lecture about commas in this class. So good luck. I think out of all of this, understanding the correct tone, when to use jargon, and how to build up your arguments are probably the most important parts.